Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Shore Community Church. I'm Nick, I'm one of the ministers here, and it's great to have you here kind of with us this morning. So Jamie's already shared with us, but I've just got one or two things I'm wanting to share before Hannah, my wife, is going to be sharing the talk for this morning. So the first thing is that this morning we had our first Shore Kids Zoom that was led by Ruth and Catherine, and apparently it went really well. There was quite a few kids on there and they had a really fantastic time there together. So just a real encouragement to you guys who've got kids. So that's for primary school age 5 to 11-year-olds. If you haven't already heard about this, if you haven't had an email about it, do get in contact with the church. You can Facebook Messenger us or email us, and we can give you the details for that to be able to join in next Sunday morning. So it's at 10 o'clock every Sunday, just for 15 minutes, and they're looking at trying to tie it into the stories in the sermons each week as well. So yeah, a really fantastic thing for the kids to be joining in together and seeing each other's faces as well. The other little thing I wanted to share with you before we continue with the talk is you might have remembered in the welcome slot last week I mentioned about haircuts, and if anybody had photos of before and after haircuts, before lockdown, and then after, or during lockdown and then after got the haircut. And we did have John and Jenny send through a photo of themselves. So this is John and Jenny before lockdown, and this is Jenny during lockdown, 3 weeks into lockdown apparently, and this is John 3 weeks into lockdown apparently. So quite similar hairstyles they've got going on there. So I don't know what's been going on in their house with their shampoo, but the added comment there was that Jamie could do with this kind of hair as well. So yeah, really appreciated there, John and Jenny. Thanks for that one. But we're going to be having our talk this morning now, and we're going to be starting off with a video before Han will be sharing.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
I think I was muted. Yes, I was muted, but I think we're good to go. It's lovely to see you virtually. I've just been around the other side of the table, and it's lovely to see you this morning. Welcome to the Brewery Lounge again. So that video that I just shared really introduces our theme for today. I felt I was actually on some training a couple of days ago, and I saw it and I thought, oh wow, that really fits in with the theme that I was thinking about. And I saw it probably years ago, and when the screen came up, I thought, yeah, like that really fits. And I thought, I know what I'm trying to look out for, but I couldn't quite remember what I was trying to look out for. So I was trying really hard, and then at the end when they said, "Did you see the moonwalking bear?" I thought, oh yeah, that was it. So yeah, that's a little bit of a taster. And the reason I thought that it would be cool to share is just because I feel like something that God's been really putting on my heart recently has been the theme of creativity. And I feel within the very definition of creativity, the premise for it is like huge, I guess. I guess that is the definition of creativity itself. So I thought I would zoom in a little bit today and go for sort of the element of reframing as part of creativity. So what do I mean by reframing? So I'm a big photo person. I love memories plastered all over the walls, on pinboards, on our fridge. And over the last few years, we've moved around a fair bit. And with that, there's come a lot of reshuffling. The sort of different photos to suit the decor or to suit the mood or the vibe that I kind of want to go for. And I've sort of been given new frames over the years, and there are different colours, there are different sizes, there are different combinations and different finishes. And then some of the photo frames have got different captions, that kind of emotively are meant to draw out something, sort of something within the frame itself. And since moving into our home last year, I had another reshuffle. I've got a few newer frames, which kind of caught my eye while I was out and about, and I'll sit for ages. I'll kind of spread out on the floor with a load of photos, and I will have the different pictures in front of me, and I'll have the different frames, and I'll like shuffle them around, and I think. I think that looks good, and I'll ask Nick, and he'll say, yeah, it's nice. And then I'll come down the next day and I'll reshuffle it, and then I'll say, well, what do you think about this? And he'll say, yeah, that looks nice. So maybe not so helpful, but I think the reason why I spend so much time faffing with frames really is because I love how putting things into different frames can really draw out a different element of its character. And I think when you move it around and you've got something different surrounding it, my eyes are drawn to something different. I think it gives it a new lease of life. It's a snapshot in time, but you kind of are seeing it through a new lens and in a bit of a different way. So you might be able to see where I'm going with this. I love a good metaphor, I love a good analogy. I'm a bit of a visual person, so kind of that's where I kind of wanted to start. I was listening to a podcast recently by somebody called Padraig O'Tuma, or he was interviewed actually, and he's a poet and he's a theologian, and he's somebody who is just fascinated by language and the power of language and the power of interpretation. And he suggested, well, what if the story of the prodigal son was actually called something different? And the subheadings that are found in the Bible weren't actually present when in the original kind of Greek and Hebrew, and they were inserted at a later date for people like me who appreciate chunking. I'm not a huge reader myself, so I really appreciate things being set out well and them being chunked. And he talks about sort of how the story itself is really a story of three bewildered men. So what if the title of the story was actually something different? In my translation, I've got the NIV, is the one I use usually. It's actually called The Parable of the Lost Son. I think that's quite a popular name for it as well, the prodigal son, the lost son. But O'Tuma kind of suggests, well, what if it was called The Story of the Lost Sons? And then you have to argue which one was the lost son. And I think that is such a powerful reframe, actually. And what if we moved our preconceptions of the parable that inform kind of our focus before we've even began to read it? So O'Tuma says there's lots of things you can do with the text, and depending on what you title it, it can automatically go in different ways. So he goes on to recommend that when reading a text, you should sit with different kind of commentaries around you. Maybe the interpretation of somebody whose work you really admire, somebody whose work you kind of get on with, maybe somebody whose work you're pretty skeptical about, somebody whose work where you think, oh no, I don't think, but I agree. And maybe a couple of more out there readings that maybe a political reading or an economic reading or something like that. And then that you should sit with others who have had a different kind of experience to you and see what they make of it too. And I guess really that's sort of the premise of what home groups are. You kind of sit together, your community together, you do life together, but you also often study the Bible together, and you draw kind of different things out of the text because you're sat in different contexts with different experiences. And I was fortunate to be raised in a kind of loving Christian home, and I've married somebody who was brought up in a loving Christian home. Is that Christian home as well. But I'm really aware that won't have been everybody's experience, and probably far from it. I attended Sunday schools and youth groups and things, and probably was taught things through a particular lens. Not necessarily saying that was the wrong lens by any means, but just that I'm aware that it was probably fairly narrow. And I think that lens kind of started to widen a little bit when we spent some time overseas, when we were in India. And we were kind of we were living with different people who were following sort of the Christian faith, but had slightly different experiences and interpretations and expressions of that faith. But we were also living in a community that was kind of predominantly Hindu and Muslim, so we also were able to experience their different sort of ways of sort of showing faith. And then I think sort of further on to that, I then went to uni, and I think my lens kind of broadened again a little bit. And I was studying theology with some people who were studying it for all kinds of different reasons. So people who were Christian, and people who were from another faith, people who were studying it more from an academic perspective, people who were studying it just because it was something that they were interested in. And again, I think that really helped me to just look at passages and sit with them and think of them in a sort of a bit of a different way. So I think this concept and sort of prompting got me thinking, what are some of the other stories in the Bible where I think that I know all there is to know already? What are some of the stories that I learned when I was 5 that I kind of learned this is the point of the story as such? And I think just to kind of briefly touch on one was Zacchaeus, and I won't go into this in detail because this would be a whole nother sermon in of itself, but I'll just sort of say I was drawn to verse 7, and maybe you want to go and look up verse 7 after this, but it was where people were muttering that Jesus had gone to be the guest of a sinner. And I think that I hadn't really focused in on that verse and what that might mean for us as those people who are muttering, and what does that what challenge has that got for us when you've zoned in on that verse, perhaps rather than obviously the traditional kind of reading and the great reading of Zacchaeus is that nobody is beyond reproach, that Jesus sees every person and kind of delights in sharing with every individual. And I think if I move on, the story that I wanted to focus a little bit more on today was Mary and Martha, kind of sticking in Luke's Gospel. And I think I'm gonna read this to you to start with. So this is Luke chapter 10, and it starts at verse 38. So as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord said, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So I think as Jamie and Nick often remind us, it's important not to proof text, and it's important not to see a passage in isolation and sort of remove it from the context of where it falls and kind of what's around it. So again, this is perhaps quite a well-known passage, And it's actually sandwiched between the story of the Good Samaritan and then Jesus' teaching on prayer. So it's the kind of seeking will find, knock on the door will be open to you. But right before the parable of the Good Samaritan, a teacher of the law asks Jesus, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus, what does he answer? He said, "What is written in the law?" And the teacher of the law said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself." And so Jesus then goes on to share the story of the Good Samaritan, and it's kind of sort of read that actually the story of the Good Samaritan and the story of Mary and Martha are the outworking of those couple of commandments. You are having sort of love your neighbour as yourself, as demonstrated in the story of the Good Samaritan, and then the love the Lord with all your God, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and then you have the story of Mary and Martha. So there's this kind of illustration there of those two approaches. And I think with this in mind, a really popular reading of the text is to take quite a dualistic approach to it. So to see Mary as right and to see Martha as wrong. I think Martha gets a pretty bad rep. She's the one who is preoccupied and worrying about stuff rather than kind of taking the opportunity to sit at Jesus' feet. And I think it's quite a bold challenge to those of us who perhaps busy ourselves with all sorts of things. Maybe that's because of a sense of self-justification, maybe that's because of a feeling of perfectionism, expectations, maybe a fear of judgment, or maybe just a kind of a lack of being able to say no, perhaps. But I think if we look at it in the full context of Luke, there's a heck of a lot of content around hospitality. And hospitality is actually viewed as a really integral part of connection and of discipleship and of love. And it strikes me that perhaps Jesus is not wanting to rebuke Martha and say she's wrong, sort of point blank. But I think he's gentle in his approach. You can kind of see when he says, "Martha, Martha," there's sort of a seeming sort of reassurance in that repetition. And I feel that this passage within itself encourages a reframing. As I say, the popular reading is that Jesus is asking Martha to focus on the relationship with him rather than worrying about all the practical things that she's presented to be kind of preoccupied with, which again would really tally with that with the commandment that sort of precedes these two passages. But there's a minister over in America, her name's Alice Mackenzie, and she writes, "I don't read this story of Jesus as Jesus elevating one aspect of the life of discipleship over another, discounting the need for outer preparations and exclusively commending the inward life. In his remarks to Martha, in verse 41, he is not chastising her for making preparations. He is suggesting she focus on the purpose of those preparations and therefore simplify them." So in fact, some of the other biblical translations include a slightly altered phrase, so where Jesus says, one thing only is essential, and Mary has chosen it. It's the main course and won't be taken from her. And I think kind of with those couple of things considered, I don't feel that Jesus is necessarily saying there's no value in what Martha is doing. But that right now there's something more important for her to fix her eyes on, to kind of fix her gaze on, and to devote her time and her thoughts to. So strip away some of those things, Martha, and take a look at what's really necessary, what's really needed right now. What you've done is more than enough and it's wonderful, but now come and be with me, come and listen, come and share. So I think Martha shows difficulty in adapting and making the most of the time that she has in hosting Jesus. I think Martha's trying to do what she would have sort of always done when looking to offer hospitality to others, the kind of the right thing, the thing of etiquette, the thing that was of culture in that early sort of Palestinian time. And should we slight her for that? We don't know the full backstory behind sort of where she's come to that sort of place of worrying, of feeling the way that she's feeling. And I think there are so many ways that that you can reframe this passage actually, and my kind of reading of it is just one. So I think Jesus here is encouraging Martha to reframe. Look closer, Martha. Can't you see what's of value most sort of right now? So yeah, forgive me if my reframing is something that you've already considered, but perhaps that's okay. I've got my lens, you've got your lens, I've got my frame, and you've got your frames, and perhaps that means we should sit down and read some passages and chew the cud and compare notes or sort of perspectives or perceptions. My point is, I think that if we stay still and if we look at the Bible with one frame and one interpretation, one perspective, where is the creativity there? Where's the scope to learn new things or see things in a fresh way? I think in my own reading of the Bible, I come with my stuff, and you come with your stuff, and what might seem obvious to you may really enlighten me. And maybe vice versa. I think I recognise that this kind of talking could evoke sort of a worry around seeing what you want to see, or making the Bible or making the text say what you want it to say. And I just want to be clear that that's not what I'm advocating. I'm advocating the spark to explore, and to question and to consider, and to get creative. I think I'm advocating that a kind of another analogy, another metaphor for it could be actually when you have a camera and you're focusing in on something, and it doesn't mean that the other things aren't in shot, it just means that what you've chosen to focus on is drawn out more. And I think that's kind of, I'm not removing things from the text or putting things in, that sort of thing. It's that interpretation element. And I think this time has been so unique for every person. For some, there's been a sudden influx of time and of space, and that may have felt kind of uncomfortable or lonely, or it might have felt freeing or renewing. For others, time has never felt so full, kind of navigating and pioneering new ways of working, new ways of kind of teaching our children, new ways of running errands for the community. But I think across the board, this time has been a refining one, kind of a redefining one, I guess, and it's a time of enforced shake-up from the usual rhythms and expectations that we've been putting on ourselves for however long. Rhythms that we perhaps didn't even know that we had. Sort of shockingly long to-do lists or to-go lists or to-see lists. And I feel during this time we've just had to get creative in how we connect with one another, how we work, how we have family time, how we educate our kids, how we meet and share as church, how we care for loved ones sort of from a distance. We might have gotten creative in what we're grateful for. We might have been able to zoom in on things that we think, yes, those are things that really bring me life and that I'm so thankful to have. It's amazing, I think, what we as humans are capable of when we're forced into a new kind of reality, one where elements are pushed to the forefront and other parts take a step back. But what if we aren't forced into that new kind of reality? What if it's something that we actively choose to do? If we view the world in a one-dimensional way, where's the room for growth? And if I saw the world as I did when I was 5, I've missed something. If we see the world as we did maybe when we were leaving school, I think we've missed something, even if we thought at the time we knew it all, like we've missed something. And if we see the world as we did 4 months ago, then we've really missed something. I would say we've all been creative pioneers during this time, and we've had to rethink how we connect and who we connect with, and where our priorities are. And we've had all the time to complete DIY, or have we? We've had all the time to cook and kind of try new things, or have we? We've had all the time in the world to FaceTime friends, haven't we? Or have we? I think I'd encourage you over the next few days to take stock and reflect on what themes might have run through lockdown. What have you learned about yourself? What have you missed? What have you not missed? There's real power in recognising, actually, yeah, I didn't miss that. And what can those things tell you about what you most value? How can you carry those forward in a creative way as lockdown eases? If we look at Martha, who obviously had really strong values in hospitality, and that's not to be something that we should. That's not something that we should rebuke her about. But I think how focused she became on that being her identity was the element, like the tipping point of sort of unhealthiness. And Jesus was just trying to call that out, to encourage her that. To bring something else into the forefront, into that more kind of prominent point of focus. And I think my hope and prayer for this time is that we don't simply return to normal. And I think I've been quite wary of that phrase, almost sort of fearful. Because I think my hope and my prayer is that we get creative, and we find in our new normal, we kind of draw out in our new normal something within us. Something within church, something within justice, something within our community, within politics, within our environment, that we hadn't considered before, or that hadn't been sort of allowed to be where our lens chooses to focus. Enforced lockdown has forced us to realise that we can do things differently, and there doesn't have to be so many excuses for not living a value-driven, fulfilling life. We've got the tools to bring something different into focus, and they're within us. I'm not saying go and sort of think, oh, I would like that character trait, that personality element, and I'm going to draw that in. I'm saying that these are things that God has uniquely placed within you, treasures that are within you, that can be brought out into the more kind of prominent focus. So my prayer is that our lives don't return back into the frame that they've always been seen through, but that we can reframe. And we can reframe kind of in a way of not just simply sort of putting your picture back on the wall in the same frame, on the same wall, in the same corner, but we can put a different frame around that same picture. You're still you, the essence of you, and the essence of the picture doesn't change. But what elements do you want to draw out more? So we might have recognised some things within us that are truly important, that we can't live without. But as I say, we might have discovered things that we can do without, things that were part of our normality, were part of our routine, things that we felt we should do or we ought to do, or were expected to do. And as I say, they don't have to be part of our picture. They don't have to not be part of our picture, but they don't have to be the focal point. So I think kind of as we wrap up, just a few things to take away from today, or maybe sort of 3 questions as such. So how do you want to reframe going forward? So not changing who you are, but bringing something else into focus that allows you to lean more into the person that God has made you to be. Leading into a life-giving, prominent value that enriches your life going forward, and therefore those around you too. I'm a really strong, firm believer that actually when we're leaning into being the best version of ourselves, being authentically us, that really impacts our relationships, and that really impacts how people see us and how we can connect with others. I think when we are being people, when we're being true to ourselves, when we're being true to the person that God has made us to be, I really feel that is the best thing for you as individuals, for me as an individual, but also for those that do life alongside you as well. And then I think that the next question would be, how can you make that reframe happen? There's a real difference between kind of wanting it and making it happen, and it will probably take some discipline. How does it become not just an ideal but a reality? What might you need to step back from, or who might you need to have a conversation with to help you sort of process that and help you along the way, sort of with that, and draw out some of those things? Who might be able to have a candid conversation with you, who knows you well, and knows what makes your heart sing, and knows what you should perhaps be bringing into the forefront. And maybe sort of practically, what motivational reminders or quotes or things do you need that kind of crop up that kind of hold you accountable, and kind of remind you of your why and why you want to do this and why that's important? Because I think it's easy to kind of remain comfortable and just sort of carry on with life as was. And what is the current frame around your faith? That would be kind of my third question. What is the current frame around your faith? Is it one that you've always known? Is it one that feels comfortable or feels safe? Is it one that you think was shaken up and was changed over a few years ago or a couple of decades ago, and you're kind of comfortable with that? Or do you need to reframe your faith? Do you need to remove the frame at the moment that you see kind of your faith through, and perhaps sit with the picture? You don't have to put, imagine me sat on the lounge floor with photos around me and frames around me, and me taking a while to test things out, to see how they look, to chat with Nick, to chat with a loved one, about what frame is the best thing to kind of hang and put back on the wall for a little while, and not forever, but for that kind of time, for that season. What frame do you kind of want around your faith going into this new season? Do you want to consider how reframing might allow room for something else to flourish and come to the forefront? I think I'm gonna close there. Really, I think would be how do we put a new picture up in our home, or put the same picture up in our home but in a new frame, in a new season. Something that draws out a different part of the picture, a different part of the photo that hasn't been drawn out for a while, or ever maybe, because we've been bold enough to try on a new frame. And how can that lead you into a richer and more fulfilling and value-led life? I'm going to pray just as we kind of draw this time to a close. Yeah, loving God, I thank you that you have made us so uniquely, that you have instilled within us gifts and strengths and values. Thank you that you have formed us in such a particular and unique way. And Lord, I pray that you would be revealing to us in the hours that follow, the days, the weeks, the months ahead, that you would be revealing to us those things that you want to bring to the forefront of our picture. Lord, would you give us confidence and courage? Would we be bold in making those decisions where we need to be bold? Lord, would you challenge us to really deeply look inside of ourselves with you at what makes our hearts sing. Lord, that we may lean into the treasures you place within us, and draw them out, and live a life of abundance. Oh Father, bless us as we go into this week ahead. And thank you for this time, this precious time together this morning. Amen. Take care, everyone. God bless, and have a great week.